Hi, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about the newest Hourglass Ambient Light Holiday palette that was released a few weeks ago, and we're going to compare it to last year's palette just to see whether there are any reasons why you should have both, whether it makes sense to have both, and we're gonna apply some of the powders from this year's palette on my medium tan skin tone so that you can see how they apply if the darkest palette really does work with someone of my complexion. I own both of the palettes. I bought the darker / tiger palette last year on launch day. I had never bought one of these palettes before, so I was quite excited to own one. The packaging is definitely a big selling point because it's quite beautiful, but also I learned throughout the year that this tin packaging is quite sturdy. Sorry, the mirror. The tin packaging is quite sturdy and makes it really travel friendly. I used this a ton last year. I took it in every trip that I took, and I took several. So it was definitely a good bang for my buck, and I can work with all of these shades. We'll look at swatch comparisons in just a few minutes, but we're not going to be playing with this one today, but I can tell you from experience that I've used it a bunch. It is really versatile and it really does work for someone of my complexion. Today, we're mostly going to be focusing on this year's darker palette, or palette 3, or most people call it the snake palette, which is this lady over here. Okay. This is the darkest palette in this year's Ambient Light Unlocked palette that Hourglass releases every holiday. Very different, definitely more pink. I think that Hourglass has been keeping up with the trends and knows that pink blush has been a big deal this year. But this is a palette. I didn't choose the snake packaging. I chose the jellyfish packaging. I am, after all, an island girl, and oceany decorations definitely appeal to my heart. So if this sounds like something you would like to see, if you're interested in seeing the comparisons and how they apply in someone of my skin complexion, stay tuned, and I hope that you will subscribe so that you can see more of the playful things that we do with makeup and skincare and beauty in this sparkly corner of the internet. Let's get going. So the first element of comparison that we have to talk about is the composition of the palette. Again, this is last year's palette. This is the Tiger palette. It was the Ambient Light Edit Unlocked Tiger. I'm not sure that this is available at all, but this is what last year's edition for deeper skin tones was. So this palette had, let's see, 3 metallic strobe powders, 2 blushes, and 1 finishing powder. And the finishing powder is supposed to be this, which in the winter works as a bronzer for me. I actually think that as a finishing powder, it's too dark for me, so I don't use it that way. I use it as a very kind of light brown blush. I just use it with a fluffy brush, or if I want to use it as a bronzer, then I use it as a bronzer in the fall winter for the most part. I use the metallic strobe powders, at least these 2, usually as highlighters, and then the rest of these powders, although this is a metallic strobe powder, I use as a blush. I use this as a blush. I use this as a blush as well. This I use as a blush and a blush topper. And then there's this year's palette, the Ambient Light Edit Unlocked. Again, this palette has only 1 finishing powder, okay? 1, 2, 3 blushes, and 1 bronzer, and 1 metallic strobe powder. So the number of finishing powders decreases to 1 in this edition. 1 bronzer, they're actually calling it a bronzer this time around. 1 metallic strobe powder, which is what Hourglass calls their highlighters, and then 3 blushes. Charlotte Holcroft's review of this was really helpful because she has a more extensive Hourglass palette collection, and so she was able to say that there are 5 new shades in this iteration of the Ambient Light Unlocked. There are 5 shades here that Hourglass has not released before, and even then, none of the palettes here are repeated in last year's darkest palette. So if you have the Tiger palette from last year and you're interested in getting the darkest palette from this year, you should not get any repeated shades. In fact, you're not gonna get any repeated shades. So if you have only last year's palette like I do, then these 2 kind of complement each other because the shades are not repeated, and it gives you a really nice range of Hourglass powder products for cheeks, which is why I'm really happy to have these two. And these give me like a really nice range of shades for Hourglass products. So with this, I feel like my quote unquote collection of ambient light palettes is complete. I wouldn't buy another one of these in the future until I finish one or it goes completely bad. So the top swatches are the 2022 palette and the bottom swatches are the 2023 palette. So some of the shades are slightly similar, but nothing really that comparable. And when you look at the names of the shades, there are really no repeated shades between the two darkest palettes. So palette 3 from last year and palette 3 from this year have no overlapping, have no repeated shades. These are all different shades from each other. One of the main differences between the palettes from the 2 years is that the 2022 palette, and I think it's pretty obvious when you look at the swatches, had 3 metallic stroke powders, 2 blushes, and 1 bronzer, quote unquote bronzer. I mean, I guess that technically you could say that it actually is a finishing powder for deeper skin tones. Here's a little bit closer. Okay, but on someone of my shade, it works as a bronzer. It definitely does. But last year's palette, as you can see, a lot more luminous, a lot shinier, a lot more iridescent powders than what you have in this year's palette. This year's palette actually only has 1 or 2 finishing powders. This year's palette, has 3 blushes, 1 metallic strobe powder, 1 finishing powder, which is that swatch that you can't quite see between the corally blush and the pink blush, and then 1 bronzer. So here are again the swatches. On top is the 2022 darkest palette, otherwise known as the Tiger palette. And on the bottom is this year's, the 2023 palette, which was presented on the snake packaging, but I have it on the jellyfish packaging. Once again, here is the 2022 palette. Definitely a lot more luminous and warmer. And here is the 2023 palette, more pink, more about wearing blush, I guess you could say. So I have some makeup from before in the day, but I'm not wearing any cheek products and I don't have any base products except for my Tower 28 Sunny Days tinted sunscreen. I'm playing around with the amount of product that I need in order to kind of like apply it properly. So it's still a bit of a work in progress. So I'm gonna start by just using the bronzer and I'm just gonna apply it with a fluffy brush like this one. This is the e.l.f. Total Face. So this is a rather large blush and as you can see, it kind of fits pretty well in these little pans. So this is kind of how I've been applying powder bronzer these days, just a big fluffy blush and just kind of spreading it. I don't want to go like too contoury because that's not my vibe. I just want to kind of bring some warmth to the cheeks, although I do feel like this is more cool toned than last year's bronzer in some ways. Or is it the other way around? No, actually last year's I think is more cool toned. This one right now with my summer shade, I feel like it can be worn as a blush as well. On me, it's a pretty subdued blush, but it gives kind of a nice bronzy glow. Again, I'm using it more bronzer style today, just so that you can see what it looks like if you apply it as a bronzer. And I'm not going for a very defined look. I'm not trying to contour, just kind of trying to bring some warmth to the face. So that's the bronzer for you. I'm using like the last scraps of natural light that I'm getting because it is officially fall in the desert and now it's basically pitch dark at 6 p.m. So in one of the sides, what I was thinking about doing was applying the more corally blush. So this shade, which is called Mystic Flush. No, is it? No, Sunbeam. Sorry, I was reading it backwards. Sunbeam. So I'm gonna apply Sunbeam in one side of my face so that you can see what it looks like. Let's go with this side. This brush that I'm using is just the Referral 05. I'm gonna go fairly heavy-handed, quote unquote heavy-handed, because like this is like, I apply a bunch of blush all the time. But this is Sunbeam so that you can see not only how it looks, but also how it interacts with that bronzer shade. Hourglass makes incredibly finely milled powders, and if that's even possible, I feel like this year's palette is even more finely milled than last year's. I don't know how that's possible, but it feels that way. So here you have the bronzer, and then you have Sunbeam, one of the blush shades. And then on the other side, I'm going to actually apply Mystic Flush, which is this bottom pink blush. I'm gonna apply that on this side with this brush, which is the Refer 24. Whew, I picked up a bunch here. See how this goes. Oh yeah, pigmentation, but that's fine. That's fine because it lets you see, one, how pigmented these blushes actually are, even though they're super finely milled, and just how they apply on skin. So that's Mystic Flush. And then, just for the sake of using another shade, I'm going to apply the other pink blush, which is called Coral Haze. So I'm going to just apply that kind of on top here. Also quite pigmented, but if you're a pink blush girl, these give you a really nice look. And they, you know, you can buff these in really well. And I personally think that thanks to how finely milled Hourglass powders are, they don't really show texture. Like, you don't really show texture with Hourglass powder products. They don't enhance texture like other powders. For the sake of, again, showing you more products in action, I'm also gonna use this powder, which is the finishing powder in Radiant Light. No, it's not. It's the metallic strobe powder in Infinite Strobe Light. I'm gonna apply it as a highlighter because that's how I would normally apply these. And I'm using the Real Techniques setting brush for that. So I'm just gonna apply it kind of on top here. Oh yeah. Very subdued highlighter. Like, this is a good kind of like daytime, office. Like, I don't want to be seen from the moon, but I want people to know that I'm here and see my face kind of shiny right there. I'm gonna put a little bit on the nose because, again, we're trying to demo products, right? So you got to show them everywhere. I'm also gonna put a little bit on the forehead just so that you can see, there you go, that illuminating quality, which I think that Hourglass powders do really, really well. Again, we're shine. Don't judge my finishing powder application, okay? I'm just trying to show you like how they bring light to different parts of the face, and I'm trying to do that in parts of my face that have more darkness. So we've used this shade, this shade, this shade, and this shade, and this shade. So we're only not using this one in this demo. So again, this is bronzer, bronzer on this side, bronzer on this side. On this side, we have this blush, the Sunbeam blush. Okay, so this side is bronzer, Sunbeam blush, and the Infinite Strobe Light powder. And then this side has the Solar Bronze shade plus the Mystic Flush shade and the Coral Haze shade up here. I feel like the pink side is definitely more pigmented. This side is definitely more illuminated. Of course, because this side has a metallic strobe powder, so that makes a lot of sense. I'm just gonna try to come a little bit closer so that you can see that these powders don't enhance texture, which makes Hourglass, in my opinion, a great brand for mature skin or for people that are concerned with enhancing texture on their face. And it's one of the reasons why I personally really like Hourglass powder products, because they are so finely milled that all you really need is a brush and being able to work them in. I'm just going to take what's left in the brush and enhance that coral a little bit more. There you go. No need to dip into the pan again. What's left in the brush should be enough. And there it is. So this is definitely a warmer look, more pink. And then of course those finishing powders all around. For some reason, I thought that this was a good idea, but I also wanted to give you a little bit of a perspective on how these powders look in softer light. So the sun is completely set at this point, and I only have one lamp in my bedroom turned on, but here is the corally side of the Ambient Light Edit Unlocked from this year with the metallic strobe powder. As you can see, that's quite luminous. I dig it. And then here's the pinker side, how it looks. Still looks really pigmented, but really nice soft blended on the other side. So yeah, these look really nice. Like my skin looks, it looks great. And you know, you can't see like texture in a way that is unflattering. These powders are really, really well designed, I think, for this kind of light specifically, just to make everything look softer and well blended, and just that, again, that glow from within that everybody wants and everybody loves. So hopefully the way that these look in this light is also helpful. I thought that I would include this little clip in. So what's my conclusion when it comes to these Hourglass palettes? So last year I bought my first one based on other people's reviews and the hype around them. I was like, well, I really want to see if these powders are so good. They are. Spoiler alert, they are. And so I bought this year's palette after seeing that the shades were not repeated and that it had more pink, so it gave me a wider range of shades in the Hourglass powder formula. So I felt like it gave me a really well-rounded collection of Hourglass cheek products, which makes me very, very happy. So depending on what I'm going for, if I want an Hourglass blush, bronzer, highlighter, finishing powder, I have a really nice range within these 12 shades that I have in these two palettes. Now, are these palettes really that comprehensive for deeper skin tones? I personally don't see it working very well. I don't see this year's palette working very well in skin tones much deeper than mine, except for, I would say, maybe these two middle blushes, the two pinker blushes, and maybe this one. I think that those would work in deeper and richer skin tones than mine, but I'm not sure about the rest of them. And so I know that Hourglass is a brand that some people believe that could be doing more when it comes to their shade ranges to address deeper skin tones and cater to deeper skin tones. And I would say I would probably agree with that, because I'm not sure that this can go much darker than me and still be visible and really showcase what the powders can do. But I do think that for medium tan skin tones, the third palette, the Snake palette, does work. I'm very happy with my purchase, and I've been using them already very frequently, because as we're getting into fall winter, for some reason I feel more attracted to powder cheek products than to creams. And so I'll probably take my Jellyfish palette with me when I travel for Christmas break. I'm gonna be traveling with some family, so that's probably gonna be my cheek product palette, which is also one of the reasons why I like these palettes so much. It's because it allows me to just consolidate the powder cheek products that I take with me when I travel, and then I can just pack one thing, which means that then I have more space for other products. Would I recommend this palette? If it's your first Hourglass palette, sure, I would say it is a good investment. It is an investment though, especially because this year's palette is $5 more expensive than last year. This palette retails for $90. And yes, it's very, very high quality, finely milled products with great pigment and a tin packaging that is really sturdy and really withstands movement and all of that. But $90 are $90. And for some people, that's definitely going to be a stretch. And I mean, this year, there's a lot of people that have seen their budgets constrained and beauty budgets being reevaluated for sure. So I would say wait for sale if you can. I would suggest waiting either for the Sephora Fall Savings event, because you can get it with a 20% discount, maybe the Hourglass Friends and Family sale. I think that's in the spring, but usually they do a 25% discount. Or if you can find it maybe in another retailer like Nordstrom, where you have Nordstrom Notes or Ulta Points or something like that that you can redeem and bring the value of that palette down, then I would definitely do that. But overall, I'm very, very happy with the way that the palette looks, and I need to start wrapping this video up because it's getting super dark. It's getting really dark. So I'm gonna wrap it up here. Again, I think that these two palettes, so the two darkest palettes, last year's and this year, do provide a really nice range of Hourglass products, which for someone like me that is interested in having nice variety of color in a formula that is really, really good for me is a great option. So I'm really happy to have these two. Let me know in the comments if you bought any of the other Ambient Light Unlocked edits from this year from Hourglass and what your thoughts are. Do you have other Hourglass palettes that you can compare them to? Have you found a lot of repetition in the shades? Let me know. I would love to hear from you. With that, we're gonna wrap it up here for this comparison of the darkest Hourglass Ambient Light Unlocked edits from 2022 and 2023. Thank you so much for joining me in this comparison and this demo. I hope to see you on the next one. And if you haven't done that already, please consider subscribing so you can join me in my sparkly corner of the internet next time. Bye.